Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, which is titled Coronavirus, Opportunity for a New Health Paradigm. I'm Suzanne Basala. I'm the President and CEO of the U.S.-Japan Council. At the U.S.-Japan Council, which was founded by Japanese Americans, we are committed to developing and connecting diverse leaders in order to strengthen the U.S.-Japan relationship. Webinars like today's are part of how we educate ourselves and others and develop together a forward-looking agenda for the relationship. Now, today we're going to be talking about health, which was the topic of our very first webinar in this series. But we're going to move today from beyond the current crisis and look ahead to a brighter future for our health system. Our speakers today are going to provide a look at the landscape of healthcare systems and look at some of the features that have been revealed because of the current crisis, but look ahead to what global innovation could look like and how we can have extended lifespans and extended health spans, which I'm really interested to hear more about today. Before I turn it over to the moderator, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for the U.S.-Japan Council in 2020. I particularly would like to thank our platinum sponsor, Fabit, as well as our title sponsors, the Central Pacific Bank, Hitachi, Ito-En, MUFG, the Terasaki Nibei Foundation, and Toyota Research Institute. I'd also like a moment to thank all the staff who make this possible and allow us to all have a very seamless experience. It takes a lot of work on the back end, and we appreciate them very much. Now, it's my honor to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Jeanette Takamura, who is a USJC Council leader. She is a professor and the Dean Emerita of the Columbia School for Social Work. And I really hope that you take the time to really look at her biography, which was shared earlier. And you see that she's committed her lifetime to supporting at the federal level and at the state level programs and policies that advance important issues for aging and health and organizational change. And she is definitely the right person to moderate today's panel. I've had a chance to know Jeanette for several years, and as you will see in the next hour, she combines her sharp intellect with a real aloha spirit. So I'm happy to turn it over to you, Jeanette.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. Suzanne, in your short time at the helm of this amazing organization, you have impressed us all with your nimble, knowledgeable, and inclusive, as well as forward-thinking leadership of the Council. Thank you for all that you are doing and all that you will be doing in the future. Now, before I introduce our exceptional speakers, we have a 15-second poll that we would like you to take. So let's put the poll up and just take about 15 seconds, just quickly do this poll. And move through it as quickly as you can. You're not going to be graded, I promise you that. So we go to question number 2. Okay. So if you've taken the poll, let's take a look at the poll results. So about 89% of you have said that your personal healthcare practices have changed since the start of the novel coronavirus. And 100% are wearing masks. Hooray! So you're taking more time to wash your hands. You're physically or socially distancing, if you will. And they have not, well, only 2% have not been practicing any preventive health measures. So I would say this is an A+ class, and you will love the speakers that we have lined up for you. Thank you for showing the poll results. So arguably, our lives and our world have been upended by several converging forces. But it is COVID-19 that has put our scientists and our health professionals in an essential race against time to save lives, our economies, and our societies, at the heart of which is human interaction. This webinar calls upon us to consider the transformations and paradigm shifts that the virus compels us towards in the multifaceted domain of healthcare, necessitated by the sobering fact that about 16.3 million persons worldwide have been afflicted with COVID-19, and more than 649,000 have lost their lives, a high percentage of these older persons. But we are still learning daily how the virus will affect one and all as it continues to disrupt the world's economy, our macro and micro interactions with one another, and a whole lot more. We are mindful that we are in somewhat uncharted waters, living in a new reality, but clear about how we must move into the realm of innovation, transformation, and paradigm shifts that ordinarily can take decades to be realized. With near certainty, we anticipate other pandemics in the years to come. The U.S.-Japan Council is thus honored to have two very distinguished speakers with credentials, involvements, and commitments that are impressive, far-reaching, and inspiring. Dr. William Haidt is the global head of Johnson & Johnson External Innovation, a gifted, exceptional leader who is at once visionary, passionate, goal-directed, and caring. Dr. Haidt's accomplishments in oncology as the physician scientist executive responsible for the Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey being designated a comprehensive cancer center are legendary. But so are his many other achievements, including leading Johnson & Johnson to become the fourth-ranked oncology company in the world within record time. And there is no doubt that Dr. Haidt is perfectly positioned now in the urgency of these times to move the healthcare industry forward creatively and productively. In researching Dr. Haidt, I took note of all the awards, decided that there isn't an introduction that would do him justice, and was struck by his ability to materialize a vision of very significant scale with a seriousness of purpose that is inspirational, engaging, and human. Dr. Hardy Kagimoto is a cosmopolitan physician and entrepreneur, a member of a new generation of scientists with a bold vision for using the best of the life sciences and the innovations incubated in the seemingly limitless worlds of biotechnology and precision manufacturing, all to combat intractable diseases and enable healing and health. Dr. Kagimoto, with his experience in Silicon Valley, found first Acumen Biopharmaceuticals, and in 2011, Helios, for which he is CEO. Dr. Kagimoto's aim is to enable healing by harnessing the promise of regenerative and cellular medicine. In June 2015, he led the listing of Helios on the Tokyo Stock Market Mothers Index, an important milestone in his effort to bring bioventures to market to treat intractable diseases. Our two panelists are eminently qualified to take us from the wicked challenges of COVID-19 to transformations within the realms of science and health that are breaking time and process barriers to intelligently welcome new thinking, new technologies, new lines of investigation, manufacturing, and a whole lot more. Let me invite you to submit questions for our speakers using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. For those who are Japanese speaking, Japanese interpretation can be accessed by clicking on the global icon. So let us begin. Dr. Haidt, you have articulated a big, bold vision for world health. The evidence is clear. You tackle significant challenges with enormous success. So let's begin with you and then go to Dr. Kagimoto, who has his own impressive record of achievements. If each of you can share your vision very briefly and the number one item on your agenda for the future of health and healthcare, we will be very much appreciative. Dr. Haidt?
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and it's really an honor to be here with Dr. Kagimoto. Really, really appreciate the invitation. So the big vision that we set out to go after a few years back at J&J is to create a world without disease, which certainly would be a big vision, a big accomplishment. And to do that, we focused our attention on preventing disease, intercepting disease-causing processes, and diagnosing diseases so early that they're more likely to be cured. So if I could accomplish one more thing, it would be to really set us on this journey to get closer to a day when there is a world without disease.
Dr. Kagimoto? Thank you, Dr. Haidt.
Yeah. So my background is MD, and I started my career as an entrepreneur because my short experience in the clinic, I felt hopelessness of the patient in a way that we could not cure. I mean, we could not deliver meaningful therapy. And with the first company, I could deliver a therapy, which was approved now globally. And then at Helios right now, our focus is cell therapy. And I'm going to describe it later in detail, but we are so excited to see that now we can genetically modify cell. Now the cell therapy world is like a coding in IT society, as people can make application in the way they want. Now in theory, we can make so many different features modifying the cell and deliver it as a therapy. So we are very excited to talk about the technologies and then discuss how we can impact the global society and healthcare system.
Great. So we have a question from Tim Kirk, and this is a question for Dr. Hardy, asking a date pertaining to COVID ARDS trial enrollment. When will the results be released? This is a very specific, targeted question.
Yeah, okay, very specific, but I'm going to answer the question. So we just announced we have enrolled one patient. So to those who are not familiar with our project, we are running clinical trials for COVID-19 based ARDS patients. And also prior to that, we have been running trials for ARDS. And the past data has shown that we could reduce the mortality rate with severe ARDS case, which is usually 60% mortality rate, down to 20%. And we are running open label study in Japan to seek for approval for ARDS patients, not knowing that COVID might happen later. But later we have seen a new virus came out, and then it causes severe ARDS. And then ARDS is now the leading cause of death who's suffering from COVID-19. We just enrolled first patient. And we had a discussion with Ministry of Health, and we came to an agreement that we're gonna enroll 5 patients only to see if we're gonna see the same tendency with the effect with the main study, which is 30 patient study, very small. And then we're gonna find out how we're gonna move forward, whether we can go approval or conditional approval, which is a very unique system in Japan. So it depends on the enrollment, the speed of the enrollment, but as soon as we finish the trial for ARDS trial, the main trial, or finishing up the 5 patient study, we're gonna announce the data and we're gonna announce the next path. But having said that, luckily in Japan, the number of the severe cases is very few compared to any other countries so far. As of yesterday, the patients who's going through ECMO is only 10. So, but at the same token, number of the patients are spiking these days. So we are carefully watching how COVID-19 was spreading in Japanese society. But nevertheless, our focus is therapy, not prevention. And at the end of the day, global market and global society needs prevention and intervention as a part of the therapy. And at this moment, there's no good therapy at this moment. So that is our focus. And we are doing our best to deliver the product as soon as possible. But thank you for your question.
Thank you. So Dr. Haidt, you know, when you think about COVID-19, and I continually call it a wicked challenge, what are your observations so far in what it'll take for us to get from this addressing of this particular pandemic to a world without pandemics, and perhaps, you know, restructuring of medical education, the healthcare industry? I mean, those are large domains, but take a stab at any one of those points.
Sure. No, thanks, Jeanette, for the question. What I would say, first and foremost, for this particular horrible pandemic that we're experiencing, we really need, in addition to important treatments like Dr. Kajimoto was talking about, we need safe and effective vaccines. And it is reassuring that multiple companies are going after making a vaccine. And it's remarkable that literally less than 6 months after the viral sequence was known, several companies are already in the clinic, including our own. This is unbelievable compared to normally when it can take 10, 15, even 20 years to develop a vaccine.
Right.
And that was made possible by a variety of factors. One is the urgency of the problem, but two was the public-private partnership that we saw in the US and other countries around the world, where governments have stepped in and provided a massive amount of funding. So companies like ours will proceed at risk. So we're manufacturing enough vaccine so that if our first trial was started 2 weeks ago, looks promising, we will have on hand in 2021 1 billion doses ready to go. So that is remarkable and exciting, and we're wishing all of the companies who are working on vaccines enormous success, because this is going to take a massive effort. So when you think about future and predicting what could come next, you think back when we first saw coronaviruses, SARS and MERS, whether or not we could have thought ahead and have been better prepared, not just with manufacturing a vaccine, but PPE, getting the word, increasing our public health infrastructure, educating the public that these pandemics, these things are controllable if we have enough testing with rapid turnaround time that are highly accurate, and then quarantining those who are positive and tracing and tracking those who've been exposed. You can control these things, but we just weren't well prepared. But it would be inexcusable if we weren't more prepared next time one of these things comes around.
So let me crosswalk from the experience within the Western hemispheres, if you will, to the experience within the Asian hemisphere, where wearing masks is almost, a commonplace thing. So if we think about sort of the difference in orientation, and we get beyond just the culture of it, it seems to me that there is an enormous responsibility for public health education in a way that is significantly different, that can leap over the hurdles of religion and ideology and other things. So, Dr. Kajimoto, from your experience within Japan, what have you seen? Has there been any increase in public health behaviors, or have people felt pretty confident that what they've been doing in the past is adequate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in general, I believe Japanese society is quite good at fighting against this kind of issues. The society tend to unite and then basically comply with whatever we have to do. But at the same time, wherever COVID-19 impacted, it certainly shed lights into the weakest link of the society. I think that's what we're witnessing. In Japan, the issue is there are certain industries there where they could not stop working, or they need basically daily paid jobs. They have no other option to work, and then as a result, that became the cause of the spike infection cluster formation. And then I think it's a really good opportunity for us to think about how we want to really design the society and what's the purpose of healthcare. Is it for the wealthy people, or is it for the general public, or what kind of society we want to see, right? But again, as Dr. Heitz mentioned, I think it was a really good opportunity to. It was a wake-up call, right? Wake up call for the whole society, and in the entire society, luckily we have kind of universal health system, which really helps, but yet we have to take serious steps to look through what really happened, and then we have to plan how we can improve. Otherwise, as Dr. Hai said, it's only about vaccination. It's only about therapy, a social system we are dealing with. And then it was a wake-up call, and that means we have to wake up and redesign and execute. Otherwise, next disaster will be a true disaster, you know.
So it's really more than just lessons learned about health. It's also the lessons learned about the determinants of health and all of the underpinnings that we may need to address very seriously in our respective societies. Dr. Haidt? Dr. Haidt? Yep. So when we think about the coronavirus potentially mutating over time, do you feel that the transformative work that's occurring now within the scientific community is anticipating exactly that kind of thing happening? It's sort of and you are the expert here, not I. I'm just taking as a layperson what I know about, the little I know about cancer, that people tend to see cancer as a monolithic entity, when in fact there are, a variety of different cancers, etc. So to what extent do we look at the coronavirus as not just one entity, but perhaps a conglomeration of several?
Right. So just focusing on SARS-CoV-2 for a second, the COVID-19 disease, what we found so far with the strains that have been isolated, that the vaccine candidate would be effective in theory in neutralizing all of them. Now, the issue becomes if there are mutants that lead to resistance, like we see every year with influenza, then you have to conserved regions of the virus. And there are conserved regions even in influenza. So in theory, you could make a universal influenza vaccine. It turns out that many of these conserved regions are not terribly accessible to the immune system. So when we developed our vaccine, and I'm quite certain that the other companies would do the same thing, we looked at a series of constructs on different regions of the spike protein, which is the device that the virus used to enter the body through a well-known receptor. And we made multiple constructs, and several constructs would go in the vectors. So if we see changes, mutations, that lead to the possibility that the vaccines would no longer neutralize and that the T-cell response would no longer eliminate the virus, we would have to move very quickly, hopefully to find a conserved region or make a new vaccine. So far, what we know about MERS and SARS, mutation to resistance doesn't appear to occur anywhere near as rapidly as you see in influenza. But if the virus gets back into an animal host, things change. So you really have to be on your toes. Fortunately, the tools of modern molecular biology allow us to move so much more rapidly today than we could ever imagine before. So we are hopeful that we will get this under control with the constructs that we and others are using, but we're also preparing that if there is a mutation that leads to resistance to vaccination, that we could rapidly move to either a conserved region or one that would go after the new strains.
Right, thank you. So we have a question from one of the audience members, essentially taking the things that are occurring worldwide and asking in particular, for example, just using Japan as a case example. Oftentimes, interventions related to diseases are treated somewhat with stigma. So has your finding been that within Japan, there is a stigma attached to COVID-19?
Yes, I think it has something to do with the old religion Japanese people believe in. It's Shinto, because it's called path in a way. That's a very Japanese way of thinking. We view things in cleaner segment and dirty segment, and disease and, virus is regarded as kegare. And then once someone is infected, especially in the rural area, people think it's kegare. Now the person is dirty, not only the virus. And then they try to segregate that person, family from the society. And as an island nation, probably that's inscribed in a DNA or culture. And probably that's how society fought against the virus in the past, 1,000 years ago, right? But it's still a part of the culture. Maybe that's helping to spread the disease without teaching them, right? But the stigma itself is not helping in the modern society. Science has advanced. We know how to treat, but the culture prevents or overreact to that kind of situation. But having said that, I think the priority at this moment is just to stop COVID-19. But this is kind of a side effect, I guess. Is it causing any real effect to threaten life? I don't think so. But it's a part of the culture we have to deal with.
Jeanette, we have a different cultural problem here in the U.S. The home of the free and the land of the brave. It's been a good thing in many respects for innovation, for creativity, for curiosity-driven research. But it doesn't work well in a situation like this where people don't want to be told what to do. And so if you tell them to wear a mask and stay 6 feet away from people, by reflex, they won't do it, because when we were growing up, we would say to our parents when they were reprimanding us something like, I thought it was a free country. And this is a different cultural problem, which is turning out to be a huge issue in trying to control the virus in the US, where people are relatively uncontrollable.
That's right. Strength becomes weakness, and weakness becomes strength time to time. And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a problem.
And what we see is kind of a reinforcement of one's own belief systems as you subscribe to networks that play the messages you like to hear. And these, of course, are, articulated more and loudly by social media. So we have now not the challenge just of social interaction and the construction of reality amongst each other in our communities, but community writ large. And so health interventions have got to also take into consideration the largeness of the communities and the complexity of them. So an interesting question that we got, which really I think also takes us from the realm of innovation to the realm of hard science and how one navigates and negotiates them. A question that came in says, regarding PPPs, as private sector entrepreneurs and leaders, when aiming for speed and safety to market of a vaccine, how do you balance the need for an ROI with the challenges of innovation in an open and collaborative way, for example, across national boundaries and with competitors? What strategies would you recommend to improve current PPPs stimulating NDDs for COVID-19? So this is really both innovation and science, and it's really kind of at the heart of it.
So I can start, and I'm very proud of the fact that we at J&J live and die by the J&J Credo, which talks very seriously about the responsibilities. And we feel that first and foremost, we have a responsibility to people, patients, consumers. And we know that we are in a very fortunate position as a very successful and very solid company with very large returns on our investments, that we can develop this vaccine with the help of government funding, and then charge what we're saying is our cost to sell to governments at our cost. We're estimating, a number that's quite low, but we are committed that this is not going to be a profit center for J&J. It's going to be something that we feel our responsibility to accomplish. We think we have an excellent platform for creating a vaccine in our adenoviral vectors, and we have a wonderful ability to manufacture the vaccines in what's called the Percy-6 cell line. So I'm very proud of the fact that we're going to do this at cost. It's not going to be a profit center for J&J. It's going to be something that we feel is right. And we've been successful for almost 140 years by first doing what's right and what's good. And ultimately, we've made out as a business quite well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Kakimoto, did you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to. So Helios is a biotech company, and unfortunately, at this moment yet, we don't have resources as Johnson do. So we were careful about this.
Someday,
yeah. But we're careful about how to plan a clinical project, right? But as I said, it has been a really interesting experience. As I said before, we started our ARS trial last spring, and there was no COVID-19 back then. And we have got orphan drug status for ARS trial because there is no therapy. But then COVID-19 happened. And we had internal discussion, and we had a discussion with Ministry of Health. And then we thought it's going to be the right thing for us to find if our therapy can be also effective for COVID-19 patients. So that's what we are doing right now. I don't know how, after we have the data, how government, Ministry of Health would like to move forward with data set. But since we have orphan drug status already, and the 30-patient study is basically almost close to be done, and we are interested to see how, in general, society would like to move forward with our therapy. And I think at the end of the day, even if we don't have approval for COVID-19, I think financially it makes sense for us to obtain approval. If we have COVID-19, we are happy to serve for the patients in the way we can. But number of the patients might be way larger than we think. Maybe not in Japan, but globally, the number of the patients are so way bigger than usual ARS patients. So that's something we did not see. But in the sector of therapeutic area, unlike vaccination, it's more segmented, and the return on investment is much clearer. So I think it makes much easier business case for us to work on with therapeutic side.
Okay. So we have a number of questions. I love it when participants are fully engaged. And I'm going to save the really big question for later. I saw it from Linda Tyra, and I would like to ask that one last. But let's ask ourselves, so recently there's a lot of talk about broad spectrum antiviral drugs or vaccines, which is not virus specific, but can be used against multiple viruses. Do you think this can be achieved anytime soon, or is it going to take a few more decades? If it can be available soon, then can it be used against COVID-19?
So if you like, I can say, so that, I would never say that something is not possible.
Right.
But I would say that finding even a universal flu vaccine has been very, very difficult. Finding a universal vaccine for all viruses would be an order of magnitude or so, or a few orders of magnitude higher. But there are other approaches, and that has to do with resilience. So the question you might ask, why do two people who are exposed to the same virus have very different outcomes? So for example, we know that people with underlying medical problems do very poorly with COVID-19 and other viruses. And those underlying illnesses need to be addressed. I've sort of referred to them as truncal diseases. If you're not obese, you're unlikely to have diabetes. If you don't have diabetes, you're less likely to have cardiovascular disease and eye disease, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't smoke, you're less likely to have lung disease. So if you can get at these truncal fundamental healthcare problems, then you create a more resilient society. And those who are more resilient are less likely to become ill when they come in contact with the virus. There's also other ways that Dr. Kajimoto and many tech companies are working on, is how do you boost the immune system? I mean, everyone's been talking about it for years with all sorts of remedies that don't work, but we now know with drugs that activate the immune system, checkpoint inhibitors, for example, and other things that could be in the realm of cell therapy, to make a more resilient, a more effective immune system might be a way that we would be more likely to be protected from viral infections. And because I do think creating universal protection from multiple viruses of many different strains and different clades would be a real challenge. Not that it couldn't happen, but it would be very difficult.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
my take. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. As Dr. Hyde mentioned, it really depends where you want to focus. You cannot develop one medicine for one virus. It just doesn't make sense. Well, it might make sense, but the pandemic might be caused by different virus, right? And the focus should be, as Dr. Hyde mentioned, vaccination should focus somewhere, some target, which is kind of preserved with different virus. Or the approach like we are taking, suppress cytokine storm in a way that it might be able to stop various pneumonia-induced ALDS patients. That is the main cause of the death. So I think we have to focus where we can make the most effect and universal manner. And I think that's most companies are trying to tackle right now. But I'd like to make a comment about we are, as we're witnessing now, so impressed that all the countries, private sectors are spending so much money to fight against one virus, right? I've never seen that before. Nobody has ever seen that. And then I'm certain that this is going to drive the science to move forward into the different level. So it goes back to some of the questions that the audience are asking, how it's going to impact to the society, right? In 100 years. You know, people talk about what happened after the pest disease, and I think it's the same thing. Difference, healthcare will be moving forward. We're going to address, we're going to act on hopefully, to fix some of the weakest chain of the link in the society. I hope so. And I'd like to be part of it. And also the culture-wise, there was a renaissance after pesto. And then I'm talking to several leaders in different fields, you know, other than healthcare, but so many things are happening to redefine a value of the society, redefine business, redefine culture, you know, that's in a way exciting. So I'm hopeful about our human race. We're gonna survive, we're gonna strive, we're gonna invent, we're gonna move forward, we're gonna be great. And I'm excited to see how human race will cope with the situation and fix it, right? And we're gonna get out of this COVID-19 situation as soon as possible.
So, Dr. Kajimoto, thank you for sharing that. It really does speak to potentially our being at the cusp of a very differently defined world, both geopolitically and otherwise, as a consequence of this wicked COVID-19 virus. So you began to answer the question, which Linda Tyra asked, and I thought it was a good one for us to engage in because we could wrap into this lots of different things. For example, the question of the role of big data in forwarding the efforts towards a world without disease, etc. So let's say, you know, you are 150 years old, if that is possible. And you look back to these years and you say to yourself, wow, we really got a few things done. And these are all the things that we've accomplished from then to now. What do you think you're going to say? What will your hindsight say to you?
Who would you like to go?
Will we have a world without disease?
So I'll tell you.
And what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean for an aging population?
Here's one thing I'm certain about. it will come from, these insights will come from some completely unexpected, unanticipated place. And that will be the breakthrough. And so, when we look back at it, I think we will say that we need to promote curiosity-driven research. Let people, the most creative people, think out of the box, and who knows, they might come up with CRISPR. Who would have thought in a million years, studying how bacteria fight off viruses, you'd come up with one of the great discoveries in recent memory. I mean, it's going to come from an unexpected place. So I'm always focusing on people who are focused on generating new knowledge, because it's the massive amount of knowledge that allows us to translate that into meaningful benefit for people and for patients. So it's going to be a surprise. Therefore, I can't tell you from where it'll come.
Right. So related to your answer and to the original question, let me ask, to what extent do you think that the use of, that there is a dominant research mindset that keeps us within the box, So you're right. I mean, I think you're right. I think the innovation is going to come from left field. No one saw it coming, but it's somebody who all of a sudden discovered that, yes, you could take paper and put glue on one side and, make it a sticky or whatever. So those things absolutely take us by surprise. But then what does it say about citation analysis? What does it say about how we constrain people to think along dominant lines, if you will? How do we get outside of the box? And does the R01 process keep us in the box? So how does government encourage innovation outside of the constraints that are currently imposed?
Yeah, let me let Dr. Kajimoto go first. I've been talking enough, and I have decades of thoughts on this, so please go
Okay,
first.
Great. Good.
I don't know how to say it in English. I think needs is the mother of invention or something, right? And we have tremendous needs at this moment to fight against COVID-19. And separate from that, as being Japanese, we are facing fast rapidly growing aging population. And then I think cell therapy makes sense to serve for the patients here in Japan. But globally, that is the situation is the same. It's going to be followed by US and China and everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why we are inventing. There's a need. And interestingly, there's a need, there's opportunity, and then talents and capital and everything get together, and we can make things happen. This is a core engine of innovation, right? And I'm running this company, but every day I'm impressed. The fact that people invented this system, right? Capitalism in a way to drive innovation. It's not about the idea in the laboratory to make it work. The whole system is now polished, and it makes sense. And I do enjoy running the company. So that is a general answer for your question. Needs is here, and we're gonna cope with it. And how will it drive scientists to come up with the ideas out of the box? I think, but if there's a need, they're gonna find a place to embed the idea. And Japan is not famous for the place for entrepreneurs, but also it's happening. The economy is kind of slowly dying here. We need new industries. And that has been an issue for decades. But I see the new leaders are coming out, especially the field of medicine, science, entrepreneurship, and hopefully they'll be able to lead the next generation's economy in a way, in the global scale. We need someone who will be able to hire people, support the society, and pay tax, right? And but again, the need is here, and people are reacting to it, and I'm hopeful.
So I have an idea. before Dr. Haidt speaks. And that is, Japan is so innovative when it comes to design, the aesthetic design. And I keep wondering whether there isn't a room for wedding art with science, because the artists in Japan have been able to push the envelope. You know, the designers have all pushed the envelope. And so it's not the case that the Japanese are not inventive, but I'm wondering whether there's a structure for learning and thinking that may be different in different disciplines. So anyway, that's my comment. Dr. Haidt.
I love this. Just a couple things. One is, you know, government funding has always been, is often conservative. Study sections made up of your peers are often conservative. And when dollars get tight, they get more conservative. But there's also something about human nature and competitiveness that drives it in the wrong direction. I'll give you an example. So one of the really creative things that happened in the US was an organization that came out of Hollywood called Stand Up to Cancer. And I was the first chairman of the board, and it was all these Hollywood producers, these women, high-powered, and they had great ideas, and it was going to be very innovative and risk-taking, et cetera, and they were going to put together dream teams, and all was going well. And then when we had some of the earliest reviews of the dream teams, every dream team was doing the same thing. They would take a recently diagnosed cancer, take the tissue, and sequence it. Why? Because sequencing, deep sequencing was hot. And then they would show that, wow, isn't it interesting? There are a lot of genomic alterations. And then when the person relapsed, they would take another biopsy and they would sequence it again and say, whoa, isn't this interesting? It's getting even more complicated. It's fascinating. And then when the patient relapsed again, and that could be the last time, they get another biopsy and sequence it again. And now the genomic complexity was so enormous, and it was scientifically extremely exciting. And I'm sitting there as the chairman and then reviewer thinking to myself, well, it may be exciting for scientists, but it's not that exciting for patients. So I asked the teams, and all the teams were literally doing the same thing. So I asked the teams, and remember, these are some of the top investigators in the world. I said to them, well, why don't you apply this same technology to pre-malignancies? And they looked at me completely confused until one guy raised his hand, and he was a physician scientist, and he said, well, why would I do that? My patients don't die of pre-malignancies. Right? So I'm thinking, and I said, exactly, that's exactly the issue. If we could understand pre-malignancies and get rid of them, then people wouldn't die. So it's a very complicated problem. All sorts of bias, gender bias, all sorts of bias in the grant review process. But to your point, Jeanette, scientists will also go where the money is, whether it's from government funding, private funding, investment bankers. They will rush toward the money, and that's an absolute key.
So we said we weren't going to be political, but what you're actually suggesting is who we vote for president may matter.
Always.
Always. Okay. All right. Dr. Kagimoto, any last thoughts? We have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, great. Yeah.
Not for each of you, but to split. Okay.
Yeah. Well, again, I think COVID-19 is a wake-up call, but I believe in the society that we're going to act well, and we're going to drive innovation, not only the healthcare, but also culture and social system. And I'd like to witness how it's going to move forward, and we want to give the positive impact. And that's a responsibility, and I will do my best. And hopefully we see more collaboration between Japan and United States, not only in science, culture, politics and others, to further strengthen the relationship. But it is challenging time, not only in the field of healthcare, but geopolitically. I think it's time to sit down and think through how we want to design the society, right? But I'm hopeful, and hopefully I like to see some lots of collaborations happening between Japan and US.
For sure. So,
Dr. Haidt?
Yeah, you know, in some ways, what COVID-19 has done something that no theoretical physicist thought was possible. It somehow or another accelerated time. We are in the future. And there are a lot of really positive things about that future in terms of access to care. You know, pre-COVID-19, in the US, from CMS, from Medicare, Medicaid databases, about 0.1% of the visits were through telemedicine. Today, it's almost 50%. In China, for example, where telemedicine has taken over by necessity, as Dr. Kajimoto was pointing out, you just couldn't accommodate all the people. It has massively improved access to healthcare, and that is going to be a tremendous benefit. In addition, the convenience of being able to do more for yourself at home, home diagnostics. You know, you don't have to go to a pharmacy to get your drugs and wait in line and figure out how to someone's trying to figure out how to use their credit card. It's ridiculous when today you could imagine a time readily that through many more common problems, most of that will be done through telemedicine. And if you need a medicine, it will be delivered to your front door within a few hours by a drone or an autonomous vehicle or something. It's going to be a tremendous improvement, and it's much, much less expensive. And so this will help in the U.S. where the healthcare system is so fragmented and so bizarre. It will help the millions of people who are uninsured or underinsured, who don't even want to go to the doctor because they're afraid it'll bankrupt them. So tremendously positive and optimism that can come out from something as dire as the pandemic that we're all living through now.
So it really is the flip side of the challenge, right? It's the opportunity that lies there, and that we would be foolish as human beings and the human species to not take advantage of that opportunity to move society even more rapidly ahead so that we see more equitable treatment of people and so that we can see truly a world without disease. I think in your discussions, your wisdom, and what you've shared with us today, you have given the U.S.-Japan Council a lot to think about. And one of the things that certainly is clear to me is the importance of how we can cross borders, not necessarily by plane anymore, but perhaps, you know, using technology to make these kind of interactions truly much more frequent. Partly because I really do believe that the immediacy of interaction really does help to construct a new reality. You know, the more we talk together, the more we share common thinking, common ways of being, you know, common procedures. So I know that we will have a formal thank you from Suzanne in just a few minutes, but on behalf of all the participants, I really do want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom, all drawn from your experiences. And I must say that you will have a fan club following each of you in the years ahead. So thank you very much. Suzanne, passing it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. And I agree, that was just a really fantastic discussion. And thank you all, and for the great moderation, keeping the conversation so smooth, Jeanette. I kind of feel like in a little way, it was a roller coaster for me listening along. Mostly I felt a lot of hope. Occasionally there were new fears I hadn't thought about that were raised. And a lot of answers to questions, but some new questions as well. But I will say that kind of the emotional reaction I had listening to it all was an immense sense of gratitude to all of you and other people who are really working so hard to help us through this crisis, and reflecting on the fact that you've invested so much in your lives and your education and taking the time to develop the knowledge that you have right now that the world is depending on. And maybe that motivates me a little bit more to think about how we can also make sure we're getting a diverse pipeline of young people in to be the entrepreneurs, but especially the STEM professionals that we're going to need in the future, and also to think about society in the ways that you've raised. But again, I just want to thank you all on behalf of the council. There's so many questions that came in and they're still coming in. So I'm sure we'll have further discussion. Last thing I want to do is, again, just thank our sponsors who make this possible for us to have these events. And I'd like to encourage everybody to stay connected, stay in the conversation. Please register for future events that USJC is hosting. We have one more webinar coming up in August, and the information is right here on board governance, another really important topic, on August 12th in the US, August 13th in Japan. And also we have our major first event of our signature series, which is the Bilateral Boardroom, that is taking place on September 16th in the US, September 17th in Japan. And registration is open, and we hope everybody will join us. Thank you again, and I hope everybody has a good day, good evening, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank
everybody.
you.